For many, the guilt of Michael Steele and Jack Wombs concerning the triple murders of Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe revolves around the disintegration of the relationship between Michael Steele and Patrick Tate, the drug importation which went spectacularly wrong, the increasingly erratic behaviour demonstrated by Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, and the subsequent threat to Michael Steele's life. In this video, we will take a look at this case from a completely different perspective and ask the question, who really was the target that evening?
It was a crime which pushed everything else off the front pages. 3 men, all known criminals, found shot dead in the Essex countryside. It was a cold-blooded, professional killing. The victims had many enemies, but which one wanted them executed?
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. So how do we answer such a complex question? Well, for me personally, it's about working out how Tucker, Tate and Rolfe ended up down the bottom of Workhouse Lane in front of the locked 5-bar gate. What was their purpose there? What was the motivation to put themselves in what would be classed as an incredibly risky and vulnerable situation? Now, firstly, I want to move back in time just briefly. We're going to take a look at November the 24th, 1995, and the handover of the submachine gun from Mad Mick Bowman to Craig Rolfe. This is told best by looking at a few short paragraphs from the statement of Donna Jaggers. I was aware that Craig's associates were Tony Tucker and Patrick Tate. During the mid to the end of November 95, I was aware that they had something going on which at this time I am not willing to discuss. Craig told me that he was going to pick up a machine gun with a silencer and ammunition for their business. He told me that this was coming from a man I know as Mad Mick, who comes from London. I do know that this person is Mick Bowman. I asked Craig how much the gun was going to cost, and he told me that it was being borrowed and was going back to Bowman. About a week after Tony's birthday, which was the 17th of November, I went with Craig and others who I do not want to name to Hollywood's nightclub in Romford. Bowman was supposed to have met us in the GlobalNet Cafe beforehand, but he didn't turn up. I then met him through Craig in the nightclub. I recall thinking that he wasn't what I had expected. Craig had told me stories about him. He was with a girl who I only know as Debbie. About a week after this, I can be no more precise than this, Craig told me that we were going to meet Mick at the Forex Services to collect the gun. I went with Craig in the blue Range Rover F424 NPE to the services and had something to eat in the Granada premises. I knew that we were supposed to meet Bowman at around 1300 hours, but he was about 10 minutes late. Craig went outside and returned shortly and told me I was to go outside with them. When I got outside, I saw that Bowman was there with a white VW Corrado car, and there was another male with an old green Vauxhall Cavalier. Bowman was acting very paranoid, and I took it that he was on cocaine and was acting hyper because of the situation with the gun. I'm aware of how people behave when they have taken cocaine, and that is how Bowman appeared to me. Bowman was trying to organise how they should drive off to a different location. Craig then suggested we should lead, the Cavalier should go in the middle, and then Bowman at the end. This only took a matter of minutes. Craig and I then got into the Range Rover and drove onto the A13 and travelled along to the Five Bells roundabout. We then came all the way around the Five Bells roundabout and Craig pulled up onto the Eastern Garage's parking area. The Cavalier parked behind us and Bowman parked the Corrado behind that. We all got out and I started to walk away to stay out of the way. I saw a blue/grey holdall come out of the boot of the Cavalier and go into the boot of the Range Rover. The driver of the Cavalier was a small man, around 5'6" tall, early 20s or early 30s, of thin build. He had short cropped hair and wore glasses. I did not hear him speak. I'm unable to say who took the holdall out of the Cavalier, but I believe Craig would probably have put it in the Range Rover because he was impatient like that. Craig called me back to the car and I got into the front of the Range Rover. I recall Bowman got into the back of the car and told Craig that he wanted the Range Rover once Craig had finished with it. Bowman then got out of the car and Craig and I drove off and went to Patrick Tate's bungalow in Gordon Road, Basildon. Craig had told me that Tate had spoken with the garage proprietor at Eastern Garages, a man called Barry Dorman, and told him that he had to buy Bowman's Corrado. I was aware that Bowman was going to stay behind at the garage and speak to Dorman about this. I recall seeing the two men walking towards one another when I was in the Range Rover. When we arrived outside Pat Tate's house, Pat and Tony Tucker were sitting in Anna Whitehead's, Tucker's girlfriend's, Suzuki Vitara. I cannot remember if Craig had spoken to them on his mobile phone prior to arriving at the house. Tony and Pat got out of the Vitara and Craig took the holdall and gun from the boot and all three went into the house. Sarah Saunders was at this time moving her stuff out of the house with the help of two friends. I didn't want to get involved in what was potentially a difficult situation, so I stayed in the car. Craig was in the house for about 10 to 15 minutes and then returned to the car with the holdall and gun. He put the items back in the boot and then drove to 108 Mill Green where the gun and holdall were put into the loft. On the way from Gordon Road, Craig was saying how pleased they were with it and how much damage it could cause. So to give some context to that statement, this submachine gun was supposedly borrowed for the upcoming drug deal in which Tate, Tucker and Rolfe planned to rip off Michael Steele. Michael Steele was going to be paid a certain amount of money to fly some drugs in for a London firm. The plan was to borrow this submachine gun, hold up the pilot and make good their escape with the cocaine. But what I want us to do in this video is not so much go by the story of Darren Nichols in terms of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were duped. They were lured down this lane thinking some cocaine deal was being flown in. They were going to rob it, make good their escape. They're coming into loads of money. I don't want to look at this in terms of what was told in court and what was put forward by the prosecution. What I want us to do is look at all of the moving parts in this story. We have Mad Mick Bowman, an individual who had spent time in prison before these murders for shotgun offences, and post these murders has also served time in prison again for firearms offences. Now recently I've come across a statement which I hadn't seen before. This is a statement which has never been shared on this channel and I'll read that out for you now. The following police statement is from Martin Marks, dated the 16th of the 2nd, 1996. I'm the holder of a full driver's licence for groups A and E. At 14:35 hours on Friday the 16th of the 2nd, 96, I was shown by Detective Sergeant Sanford of the Essex Police another driving licence in my name bearing a previous address of Rewinds, Collingford Lane, Dane Hill, Haywards Heath. I have checked the signature on this licence and I can confirm that it is mine and authentic. I cannot recall any particular instant where my driving licence could have been stolen. I left the address shown on the licence around the 11th of 1990. I have had my car stolen once in 1990 from outside the London Weekend Television Studios. This was a green Saab 900. As I understand it, someone was arrested for this. There is a possibility that the licence was stolen then. In the 2-year period preceding 1990, there were 3 times when my vehicle was broken into, 2 or 3 times in London and also an occasion in Holland. On all of those occasions, it was the radio that was stolen. I do not believe my licence was stolen then, as I keep the licence with my credit cards. I can only recall my credit cards being stolen when the car was stolen in 1990. I remember I had given the police a list of the items stolen. I am satisfied that the licence referenced DB/1 is mine. I have been told that a man by the name of Bowman was found to be in possession of the licence. I do not know this man, and he has not got authority to be in possession of it. Okay, so a little bit of a strange twist to the story here. So we've got Michael Bowman, who's in possession of this man's driving licence, and I believe at the time that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were murdered, Bowman was actually a disqualified driver. So could it have been that he was carrying around this man's ID, his driving licence, and if he was pulled over, for instance, he would give a false name, show them the driving licence, and make good his escape, hopefully. But where exactly did this driving licence come from? I would imagine it was found in Bowman's property, or at Bowman's property. Now, on the 16th of the 2nd, 1996, there is a police statement from Graham Hadley, which states the following. At 5:10 hours on Thursday the 15th of the 2nd, 96, I was on duty in Queen Anne Avenue, Bromley, Kent, at its junction with Westmoreland Road when I saw a person I know as Michael Scott Bowman being escorted by a Metropolitan Police officer out of number 38 Westmoreland Road, Bromley. I could see that Bowman was handcuffed. I said to Bowman, quote, I am Detective Sergeant Hadley from the Essex Police. From information received, I am arresting you on suspicion of being in possession of a prohibited weapon on or about the 1st of December 95, end quote. I then cautioned Bowman and said to him, quote, you are now going to be taken to Chelmsford Police Station where you will be questioned. Do you understand? End quote. Bowman replied, yes. Bowman was then conveyed by Essex police officers away from the scene. I then escorted Bowman's girlfriend, Deborah Ferguson, back into the ground floor flat at 38 Westmoreland Road, Bromley, together with other officers to supervise a search of the premises. Now, interestingly, the date of that statement from that police officer is the 16th of the 2nd, 1996, which just so happens to coincide with the statement of Martin Marks of that very same date. 16th of the 2nd, 1996, where he is questioned about Michael Bowman having his driving licence. So all I can imagine here is that this driving licence has been found during the search of Bowman's property on that date. So what is the reason for this? Back to that everlasting question. Now, to play devil's advocate here for one moment, if you were in fact a disqualified driver, you had some sort of dealing in this murder, then what better way to kind of disguise that in some way or take some extra precaution, I guess you could say, than by having someone else's driving licence. The last thing that you're going to want to happen if you're driving about, if you're involved in this in some way, is to be pulled over and for the police to realise, actually, this person's a disqualified driver. It's going to cause you a lot of hassle. Why not take someone else's ID, someone else's driving licence with you, just in case, on the off chance you are pulled over and you can give someone else's identity. So what I want us to do at this point in time is take a look at what has happened so far. November the 24th, there's a meeting at the service station between Craig Rolfe and Michael Bowman. There's the changeover of this submachine gun. Rolfe is now in possession of that weapon. And then we also have the fact that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe are found right next to a shooting range. We also have the undisclosed telephone call between Tucker and Bowman on the day of their murders. 17:07, call between Tucker and Bowman, undisclosed telephone call. We also have the voicemails which were left by Bowman to both Tucker and Tate on the day that they were killed. So is there a connection here? Is there a connection with these firearms and the location at which Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were found murdered? So at this junction, we ask ourselves, who indeed actually wanted that machine gun? What was the purpose for that machine gun? Is it, as we've been led to believe the whole entire time, that Tate wants this weapon, it's his idea, Steele has approached him regarding this deal, Tate comes up with the idea to get the submachine gun or some kind of high-powered weapon in order to do over this pilot, do over the London firm and run away with the cocaine basically? Or is there something else going on here? Because we know that Craig Rolfe was naturally closer to Tony Tucker. Was this Tucker's idea? Was it Tucker that actually wanted the firearms? Could that be a possibility? Is the link here actually between Tucker and Bowman and not so much Tate and Steele? Let's take a look at the following police statement. The following police printout is from Mrs. C.J. Evans, Firearms Licensing HQ, dated the 12th of the 1st, 96. Inquiry, Mr. Peter Webb. The above registered firearms dealer, who also holds a personal firearms shotgun certificate, contacts me on the above date with an inquiry relating to his son's firearms certificate. During the course of the conversation, he mentioned that he knew one of the people who was shot and killed in Rettendon recently. As I know that one of the persons killed was a Mr. Anthony Tucker who had recently made application for the grant of a firearms certificate, I was assured Mr. Webb was referring to him. I of course did not respond in any way to Mr. Webb regarding information, but feel that due to the possible drugs involvement and the interest previously being shown regarding Mr. Webb's involvement with drugs recently questioned at Heathrow, that I should record his comments for your information. So interestingly here, we have Tony Tucker shortly before he is murdered applying for a firearms licence. Now a lot of people do find it strange that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe go to the trouble of renting, borrowing, buying this submachine gun from Mad Mick Bowman, yet it isn't with them on the night in question, the night that they are murdered, the night that they are killed. What is the reason for that? They're going down this lane. Is it just to look at an airstrip or a field where a plane's going to land? I mean, that's the story that we've been told. Or could it have been that really this was nothing to do with it? The submachine gun was planned for something maybe bigger than we've been told. Or was this simply an ego trip as far as Tucker's concerned? Because I'm looking back at another statement from a man by the name of Brian Mixture, and it's in his police statement that he states the following. During 1994, Tucker became more friendly with me, and on occasions I would drive his black Porsche 928 car for him. I think it's fair to say that on occasions he liked me to drive for him and act as his minder. I'm also aware that Tucker was involved in the drugs world, and it was through Tucker that I met his friend Craig Rolfe. At one time, Craig was more involved with Club UK Wandsworth. Tucker would call on me offering me a day's driving, but to be honest he was full of promises, but I hardly ever got paid. Late in the year of 94, I moved into Tucker's flat in Shearers Way, Boreham, number 30. I should also say that as I gained his trust, he asked me if I was capable of shooting anyone. I told him that shooting people wasn't in my nature, I just didn't want the hassle. I was also asked if I would cut people. Again, I told Tucker that I would fight anyone if I had to, or I supposed if he asked me to, but again I could see no point in marking people for life. So when I'm reading that there, I guess the first thing that's popping into my mind is, was this simply just an ego trip for Tucker? A show of power? Get these weapons, obtain a firearms licence, shoot them over at his address in Fobbing, which according to Donna Jaggers that's exactly what he does. Because I do find it weird that this submachine gun stays in the loft on the evening of December the 6th. If there was anything massive going down, then a lot of people do find it bizarre that these individuals were most likely unarmed. So does this submachine gun actually have more to do with Tucker than this supposed upcoming robbery of the cocaine? The deal between Tate and Steele. Steele's going to fly it over. This is all to do with Tate and Steele making right for all the stuff that's happened regarding the dud cannabis deal, the dud cannabis fiasco. It's really a deal which is organised and orchestrated most definitely between Steele and Tate. At least that's what we're led to believe. But does, as I say, this submachine gun have a lot more to do with Tucker than it does Tate? Another aspect of this case concerning the relationship between Pat Tate and Michael Steele again revolves around this dud cannabis fiasco. In Donna Jaggers' statement, she claims that there was a great deal of tension between Steele, Tucker and Tate, that Tate lost his mind, he lost his head and smashed up all the cannabis before it was returned. Yet in court, there is a very different story told by Darren Nichols and also the judge during the summing up process. The following is from the judge's summing up in court, where he states the following. Darren Nichols threw the cannabis away in the arc sand pits at Braintree. You have seen the photographs, members of the jury, P10. He identified that photograph and also P11 as looking like broken bars of cannabis. Most of the bars were broken because Nichols started to check to see if it was any good and broke them in half. They were in a sports bag with a broken zip, either a head or a Jaguar bag. After a time he mentioned the whereabouts to Steele, but he did not have any conversation or attempt to have any conversation with Pat Tate about it. Now this is in complete contrast to the word of Donna Jaggers, where she describes Pat Tate, as I said earlier, losing his head, this massive tension between Tate, Tucker and Michael Steele, where Tate then smashes the cannabis and returns it. Let's take a look at this small section of Donna Jaggers' statement. The agreed amount per kilo worked out to be approximately £10,000 for the lot. Already the others had placed their own share with other dealers, but very quickly they started receiving phone calls telling them that the cannabis was very poor quality. I learnt through Craig that Tate and Tucker were very agitated because Steele during this time was trying to push the price that he wanted up. In effect, this was eating into their personal profit from the deal. They contacted Steele and told him they wanted their money back because the cannabis was rubbish. Steele didn't want to take it back. Tate and Tucker then started putting real pressure on Steele to recover the money. By pressure, I mean through intimidation. I cannot say exactly what they did because I do not know, but I recall hearing conversations they had with Steele on the phone where they were ranting and raving at one another and pacing up and down. I understand that Steele finally agreed to return the cannabis and get their money back for them. Tate, in a fit of temper about the whole affair, smashed each slab before it was returned. So interestingly, in the judge's summing up there, it talks about there being photographs of this cannabis which was recovered from the arc pits. Now, in that photograph, or those photographs, it shows broken bars of cannabis resin. So I just wonder if there's a little bit of embellishment here in Donna Jagger's statement. Has this little bit of information been chucked in there? In case this comes to court, they can look at these photographs, they can then relay that back to Donna Jagger's version of events. Tate lost his mind, he smashed each slab before it was returned. Oh look, here we go, here's the recovered cannabis, and surprise, surprise, it's all smashed to pieces. But interestingly there, it's mentioned that Darren Nichols was the individual who actually broke apart that cannabis to check if any of it was any good. Now, moving back to Tony Tucker and his relationship with Michael Bowman for one moment, I think it's important to remember that the person who receives the phone calls on December the 6th, 1995, the very calls which are supposedly to arrange the meeting for later that night where Tucker, Tate and Rolfe are murdered, those two telephone calls both go to Tony Tucker. There isn't one call to Tony Tucker, then one call to Pat Tate. There isn't two calls to Pat Tate. Both telephone calls go to the mobile phone of Tony Tucker. If Pat Tate was the catalyst, if Pat Tate was the motive behind these murders, then why is the arranging for the meeting that evening going through Tony Tucker? Also, as discussed earlier, we have the undisclosed telephone call between Michael Bowman and Tony Tucker at 17:07, potentially just 2 hours before Tucker, Tate and Rolfe are killed. And another point worthy of mention before we bring today's video to a close is that on the evening of December 6th, 1995, Tucker, Tate and Rolfe had a meal booking for 8 p.m. at the Global Net Cafe. This reservation was changed from 4 persons to 6 shortly before the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. We know from the statements that we have read in this case thus far that Michael Bowman knew of the Global Net Cafe, the very place where these individuals had the meal booking. Is it beyond the realms of possibility to suggest that one of these extra individuals who is due to attend that night could have been none other than Michael Bowman? And lastly, does the presence of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe down the bottom of Workhouse Lane on Wednesday the 6th of December, right next to a shooting club which only shot on a Wednesday, does their presence down that lane, does the desire for weaponry, the submachine gun, Tucker applying for a firearms licence, Tucker being in touch with Mick Bowman, someone who had served time for firearms offences and who had provided them with that submachine gun, does all of that connect somewhere? Was this more to do with purchasing weapons, selling firearms? Does it have more to do with that than some fanciful plane that's going to fly over with a load of cocaine? Which story to you at home would make more sense?